Okay, welcome back to those who are visiting online. Next up, we have the corporate, or I'd like to call the Corporation of County Bruce Corporate Services Committee, Finance and Property Division to order. At this time, ask anybody if they have a declaration of pecuniary interest. Hearing none at this time. Action items, 2016 business plan and budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So as promised, when we met on October 8th, we had presented you with a budget that included all of the asks and adjustments in revenues for 2016. And the document that I circulated you today is found on page 47 of the package, but it reflects what you received on October 8th. So you can see the first column of numbers showed you what was approved, the levy approved in 2015, 2016, where we were at, and that it was an increase of 3.5 million, or an 8.67% increase. We appreciated the feedback from council and took that direction. We heard 4%, and throughout the last 2 weeks, the department heads, under the direction of the CAO, have reviewed the budgets, and as we collectively brought them together yesterday, and then even making some adjustments this morning. So if you'll see a couple of tiny changes that I'll refer to, but we were able to reduce the change to 1.729. So 1.7,733,000 was reduced from what you received on October 8th. With that in mind, we still fell short, as of yesterday when we reviewed it, of 113,000. And we do believe that, there are a few other opportunities that we have not been able to perhaps review, and we have not received the Bruce Lee Haven budget for review either, and so we would be looking at some of those other options, and we all know here in the 2,000 there all do add up, so we will be tasking us to, if that is council's direction, it is an additional reduction of just over 113,000 to reach the 4% recommendation. So I want to turn your attention to the net changes, so the final block column in that document, and you can see for each of the various departments what the adjustments have been made to bring that 1.7 million. And we've asked the department heads that were able to join us today to be able to identify what in fact those changes were to each of their departments and the significance of those changes. The bottom portion of the document identifies the changes in salaries. Now, if you look at transportation, that one is an odd one. This is the salaries that rolls up in the program budgeting, but because the biggest portion of their salaries and wages are reflected in their construction programs, it's rolled up in that. So this doesn't give you a true picture of the transportation, but it does in the other areas, and you can see where the increases are reflected. And further to that, to the column to your right, is the change in the FTEs. And again, the message that we heard was the supporting certain functions within the corporation, and you can see that those changes in each of the department heads that are affected by that will speak to that as they speak to their changes. I would also mention that within the document, or within what Darlene has prepared, not once, twice, maybe, as we continue to make sure everything was totally up to date, are the up-to-date business plans. So if you want to go back and reflect on those, that they are available for you to review as well. The other item that I wanted to, and I'm looking at the Excel sheet, so I should probably go to the document if you're looking at PDF. I don't think, the full consolidated is not is not included in, is it included? It is? Okay. Yep, okay, thanks. So as we scroll through and in each of the different departments, you will be able to review where the changes are, but the one document, and, which will be, I'll just get the right page here for you. So the County of Bruce summary sheet, page 61. And what this again reflects, as a reminder, the adjustments per pressure category. So in the third column is adjustments to base. So those items that have been eliminated, won't be repeated, have already been approved by council and have already been supported. For the most part, it is capital. We've taken capital out of the adjustment to base, and then we've added it back in under, for the most part, maintained services. So if I draw your attention to the very final column, this is where you will see the change in expenditures by program, and that is what is important to keep in mind, that it's only the change in expenditures. So if there's a significant offset in revenue, it will be shown under the bottom section of this, and then you'll be able to see that in each individual department sheet to see what the net is. The net is shown on the page that I handed out. So just to give you, in the second section, the expenditures by type, this is what is a bit of a snapshot. It tells you that the salaries, wages, and benefits, with the exclusion of the transportation portion of it that's tied up in the programs, the capital programs and construction, is 1.4 million. Staff-related costs, which are, again, meals, travel, those will be included in there. Contract, so an increase of 8,700, staff training, et cetera. Contract services, which will include utilities for housing, but no other department. They are in the facility costs. Materials, 507,000, driving that. The transfers to reserves is actually a decrease. And then in the capital, there's I guess, again, a snapshot of, it's indicating to us that our capital is actually reducing 479,000. But we have to keep in mind that there were some one-time capital expenditures, and the purchase of the DFIBs comes to mind as I look at that capital. So when there are one-time capital expenditures in a year and they're not continued in the second year, then that will impact. So it's not, I don't want council to look at that and say, you know, oh, in order to get to a 4.28%, we've just cut our capital and taken out the 479,000. And then the fleet costs and the facility costs are actually, but overall the net expenditures, an increase of 2.1 million. And then you can see where our revenues, where the impact to our revenues, utilizing in the reserve funds in the federal, the change of 195,000. So the overall impact in our revenues, a change of $466,000, an increase. So that brings the 4.28% or the $1.7 million increase on the levy, and a 3.16 addition of full-time equivalents. So what I'd like to do now is to summarize each of the department changes, and I'm just going to, if the department heads are comfortable with it, they can just speak from their seats. We've just asked that each of them be able to speak to the changes that are included in the October 22nd submission. And I can begin because the CAO didn't reduce her budget from that that big 254,000 in that department. Although she did offer, but we suggested that we would want to maintain that. So in corporate services, where we were able to achieve some changes, to begin with, we and attached to this was an information item, was the reserves. And we did task department heads to go out and take a look at the reserves and particularly analyze some of the ones that if they're there, if they, if we've overfinanced them over the years, or if they're unassigned, then it's always good to look at that. It's never good to use reserves for ongoing operations, but when it's capital and they're one-time, it certainly can support utilizing reserves for that. So some of you will remember that for years we put in $25,000 annually to the Wide Area Network Reserve and built that up to a point where we were able to move forward in IT to make some adjustments, and certainly there is but as far as the wide area network, it has been determined that project is complete, but we need to embark on the things that are going to change us with telephony and communications. And because we have $125,000 in this budget to support additional expenditures on that project, I believe that it was appropriate that wide area network reserve be utilized and reassigned for the telephony upgrades, because it is all sort of married into that same communications and getting us to be mobile. So that recommendation is to reassign that reserve for that purpose. Council is aware the realignment of the position within corporate services with the redundancy of the one position is determined that that position be evaluated to determine the exact scope of work, and as we're still undergoing transition with IT, I believe that, and in discussion with the CAO, that we would delay that hiring of that position till September of 2016 to be in a better position to be able to move forward. So that reduced $52,000 out of that budget, but recognizing that would be annualized in 2017. The other item, upon review of the reserves, as you know, the Microsoft Office licensing has been removed from each of the individual department budgets and brought in under the umbrella of the IT division. We determined that collectively there was still about $37,000 that was in various reserves, departmental reserves, and that it needed to be reallocated to offset the expenditure in 2016. Made some minor adjustments in capital and other for the Park Street under facilities. The Great Lakes membership, it has always been addressed by planning and development, but never formally recognized in a budget for membership payment. So that's actually an increase of $2,000 to continue that membership in that organization. The other item that we looked at, and we often speak about because we are dependent on other organizations' budgets, and in this case, the Grey Bruce Health Unit. So based on some very recent correspondence from the Health Unit, we originally had a 2% increase on our 2016 budget, which was $23,800. So we were projecting an increase. In speaking with the Health Unit, our share that we budgeted for in 2016, in 2015 included almost $30,000 of one-time funding, and also $8,000 for the SINOT expansion program, which we have been told is being discontinued in 2016, so we won't need to continue with that share. And we have no indication that there would be a request for one-time funding. So I feel very comfortable in eliminating both the proposed 2% increase, the SINOT expansion program, the one-time funding, but leaving $15,000 in to accommodate any one-time funding request. And it also takes into consideration that for the last number of years we have had a surplus returned from the Health Unit, modest, but yet it would also accommodate if we have any in-year requests from the Health Unit. The other item that is not included in the corporate services budget, but it is rather included in the non-departmental, is our payment to MPAC, so the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And the original budget included a increase of 2%, and I went back and did a 5-year analysis, and for the last 4 years, the estimate, the average increase was about $4,000, although from 2011 to 2012, there was a significant change just in the method, so it was a $42,000 increase. But our last, most recent history would suggest that it is an average of about $4,000. So we have removed the increase and just reduced it to a $10,000 allowance to be able to recognize if the MPAC costs do increase slightly during 2016. And that is what totals the change of $215,123 in the corporate services budget. The other item that I just wanted to, for information purposes, is related to insurance. And as you know, we have increased, the direction was to increase budgets by 5%. We are moving towards, we're in negotiations with that, but I would offer that if we have over budgeted for insurance, my recommendation will be to take that savings and transfer it to our reserve for insurance deductible. We increased our deductible when we had the savings last year in our renewal. That part of that was increasing our deductible from $10,000 to $25,000. So when we have a claim and there are expenses incurred, we are responsible up to the first $25,000. So there was $25,000 in the budget last year. I believe our reserve remains at about $10,000 for that particular, at this period of time. There's a further $25,000 that would be added, but that would be just to accommodate one claim. So my recommendation would be anything that is not required would be transferred, but again, that's for information purposes for a later date. The other item that you're going to hear from all of the department heads, and particularly where it focuses on, is looking at our utilities, and that was suggested that we, at this point, based on and certainly housing is one of the big contributors. Just based on what we know now, we were looking at projecting a 15% increase, and the direction across the board was to perhaps reduce that by at least 1% and assume that risk within the budget, knowing that it is somewhat unknown at this time, but in many of the departments, it is a very small adjustment. So if there are any questions related to the changes in corporate services?
See none.
Human resources, Marianne?
Thank you very much, through you, Warden. We have had a reduction in the human resources budget, and what we had initially opposed was the additional headcount for 3 individuals, 2 in 2016 and 1 in 2017. We've realigned that to have an increase of 1 position in 2016. That 1 position remaining is the proposed HRM role that will really help with the Avante, both from the payroll and HR side, to ensure that the integrity of that system is intact and that we're moving forward in the HR side of the software. And so that has reflected in a cost savings of $67,957 plus the related employment expenses such as travel for a total of $2,000. We've also reduced our conferences by a total of 9,870, and the reason we've been able to do that is we're not going to be traveling to Banff this year. Last year we had 3 people go to Banff. What alternatively we're going to be doing is bringing the consultant on site to look at the specific requirements of our system and assist us with those implementations. And those costs were already previously budgeted within the consulting fees, so we're going to eliminate that conference. We've reduced our memberships. We had the payroll staff join us last year. We had estimated the memberships. We see the actual number this year, and so we were able to reduce on that basis. We've also reduced $5,000 in our training budget. That is offset somewhat by funds that will be coming out of the CAO's budget to help with loyalist training, because the HR does have 2 individuals that will be attending cohort number 4. And as a result, we were able to deliver a negative 3.99% increase.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Questions for Mary Ann? Hearing none.
Planning and development.
Thank you very much. So in terms of potential savings in our budget, there's a couple of smaller items around $9,000 regarding furniture upgrades for some of our new office space, and also the Microsoft licensing has been removed. So one aspect of that, the furniture out of a reserve account that we had, and $12,000 being transferred out of our budget to somebody else's budget. The biggest one we've been asked to take a look at staffing, and in terms of what we would do with regard to that. So the proposal at this point, as council is sensitive towards the full body count, would be to look at reducing the full staffing contingent that would fully launch the economic development model by reduction of 2 positions. And so what that would look like is to retain on the planning side the one planning tech, to hire in under sector development the actual project coordinator, and that will complete that side of the economic development picture. And we would remove potentially the business development officer and the information officer that provides support to that person. So the total reductions in terms of the percentage is down from 13.57% to 7.76. Is that the right one? 7.76.
Any questions for Chris at this time? Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Warden, just clarity for committee members that the other 2 that you see under the full-time equivalent headcount are the BEC positions that are funded.
David?
I think we'd have a little discussion about the economic development model. It's something that I know we've been looking forward to and coming forward with. I guess what I'm saying is I've always liked to say that we shouldn't increase staff a great deal, but this is an important project for us and is going to provide a lot of help for the municipalities, the lower tier municipalities. So that if we have that model in place, we're going to require at least 2 staff and maybe 3 in 2016 to make sure that that keeps moving forward. I know it's tough when we talk about increasing staff, but to me this is one that's really going to improve things at the local level. Economic development is important for us, to us, so I would support the increase in staffing level in the planning and development area to the level that makes sure that we move forward with this model.
Thank you, David. Bob?
I also would like to support that, and also comment that the more economical work that is done through the county, that saves us on the lower T. We don't have to have that expense as much for economic development if the county takes the initiative and does a lot of the work. So I do support an increase on this particular item.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Other comments, questions? Anne?
So so you're recommending that we don't reduce by 2 full-time equivalents? Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay. So if we reduce by 2 full-time equivalents, how many new staff? Then 2 new staff for economic development? And
Yeah, so The way it would work is, regarding business enterprise centers running a contract with the province, and there's funding that falls with those people. And then the way it would play out in the bigger picture is that we would have those two staff members covered, and then we would share the responsibilities of one of our managers under business development and manage those people directly. Plus they would take on some other portfolios. The way, and it's a little bit difficult because we're sort of dealing with the numbers, and we just had to sort of use our best judgment in terms of which ones we would pull out, recognizing that there's impacts either way. We haven't had that broader discussion with council in terms of what it would mean. But, so at this point, the position that we would fill, if we only had one, would be the sector development project coordinator. There's the planning technician on the other side of it, and two ones that would be left out would be business development officer and information officer for business development. And then with regard to the BECs, if we're successful in the transition of BEC, then those two people will report directly to the manager of corporate policy and economic development. So it's an issue whereby, in one sense, if we hire into the sector development, it completes that aspect of that side of the program. So currently, we'd be focusing a lot on the tourism aspect of it, but that person would be able to develop new projects associated potentially with nuclear, agriculture, and try to build some basic programming and support around those areas. The issue with regard to the business development side of it is that we've created a framework through what we saw at today's committee in terms of what are the essential elements or tools that we need. And we're starting to get those in place, but then in 2016, those functions wouldn't be manned. We wouldn't have the warrant bodies to pick up the phone and fulfill the requirements and so on and so forth. So if you're a bit puzzled, I am as well. It's just that and the way we built the program is sort of by doing the consultation at the community level, business community, and through council with a number of different reports that sort of build the framework for that economic development terminology and ideas is somewhat complex. And so I'm 100% sure that I want you to fund the whole thing. On the other hand, if there's pressures from a staffing perspective, then it may bear a bit more conversation with council in terms of I'm giving you one option of what we should fill. And based on the objectives of council, some of the things that we talk about, there may not be a super high level of comfort where I'm cutting from. Other than I know, we've taken a long-term view of a couple of years is that we get the planning one in order, and then to show around the economic development one, there's the business side of it, the business to business, which is essential because we can't do this all ourselves. So we need leaders and advocates in the community to align with the county's objectives, and so we built a framework to allow for that, for those relationships that will feed into the relationships with the local municipalities, and that's sort of there. But it's just from the county perspective, not necessarily resources then, and we're on proposing to fulfill that in 2016.
If there's not enough staffing, does it squeeze the tourism part too much? Because I know the county's always done a terrific job of the tourism side.
It's a good question. And I would say to this that we didn't just maintain, through the review, we didn't just maintain our tourism services. We stepped back and took a review of all those programs that we run, determine which is critical, should we be operating at the Grey Bruce level and the rest of it. So as a result of that review then, we found roughly $160,000 in program savings by redirecting it to projects we think could be winners. So at the same time that we're working in the background to fill out which are the good projects versus the bad projects, where do we go, we're also using the same methodology to evaluate the new projects as we move forward. So in terms of we provided ourselves with some room in trying to make existing programming more efficient, and that's where we received some of those savings by reviewing the old programs. So it's not like we took the tourism program and decided we'll add a whole bunch of more elements to it. We tried to integrate it. We tried to share some management responsibilities. So that person, there was a vacant position that was the tourism manager, And that one will be refilled with a different title called sector development. And that person would have tourism in their portfolio, nuclear, so on and so forth, and then try to have an impact from that sector approach. And then the other one is more, I wouldn't say pure marketing, because it's not like that, but it's marketing with the proper information and the proper contacts and the leads with the support of the business community. So it's almost like there's two streams within that economic development model.
So when you're trying to get changes and programs off the ground, it often does take extra effort. And so I would support kind of reevaluating it, the number of staff needed after a year. Like if I'm willing to take staff's recommendation, you know, we need this amount of staff. And now, then once we have it off the ground after a year or two and it's kind of running, then you can reevaluate it again. Is that a possibility, or am I way off base?
Do you want me to answer that, Kelly, or would you? Okay. Yeah, there's all different options we could look at in terms of whether we contract or full-time or whatever the case might be. My biggest concern is that council knows exactly what Chris is doing in the countryside, right? I don't want to have a disconnect and accidentally pick a theme area that you're not super comfortable with. So I would say that the amount of effort that's been put into it in terms of leaving no stone unturned, I think we would be seen in the county to be leaders and not trying to impose a new county process on top of the old. We tried to take the old exam and hung it upside down, shook all the dust out of it, and kept what we thought was good. And because of that, then we've been able to pare back some of the programming on the other side to give ourselves some room in order to go into these other fields. And again, merging the management of the tourism responsibility in with the rest of those sectors. So I feel confident that these people would be properly deployed to the tasks, and I feel confident that the model is reflective of a Bruce County solution. At the same time, if there's a level of uncomfort with County Council in terms of the direction that we've chosen, not so much with the number of people, with the direction, that would concern me more. Because fundamentally, we haven't gone down this road before, because economic development is fraught with these types of conflicts. Like, what is it? What's it about? What are the measures? So our programming has typically been small, targeted, and for the most part grassroots, and not really on the radar. And so that's been okay, and that's kind of worked, and it's had a community impact. Now we want to move up to that regional level, use some of those skills, but bring it up to the higher level and integrate that with what the local municipalities are doing. And there's a bit more risk associated with that. We're 100% confident that we have the proper methodologies. But what we're talking about is creating change, 5-10 years down the road in terms of making this happen. We don't want to be losing opportunities because our voice is simply not out there. So there is a danger of hiring a person that doesn't have the proper tools and background information and speaking with a consistent voice that dovetails with council's message. So we're trying to put it all together in one package. So again, if there's a high level of trust that this is exactly the road that you want us to go down, I would hope that to be the case. And if there's budgetary pressures in terms of the total number of people, we need to check back in with council and say, given those budgetary pressures, this is the plan B, so that there's a full understanding of that. And I must say that in terms of the sheer scope and volume of the reports, the last year and a half, it's been coming at council and staff very, very quickly. And it wouldn't hurt to do a check-in to ensure that council's idea of economic development and their perspective on the community is properly reflected in the program that we've been advocating for the last year and a half.
Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Warden, yesterday Chris and I had a conversation about bringing in an individual that is a leader in economic development, and having that individual lead a discussion in particular with council members, but I would go so far as to say the next step in terms of having the representatives from your local communities also participate, because we're not, we don't feel that we've done a complete job of getting a sense of what you want in your economic development program at the county level, and what you think or where it makes sense to distribute it between the county and the local, and start to talk about the outcomes that you want us to achieve.
Milt?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. I think that I like the sound of that. To me, it's a good idea to touch base with the local municipalities, just to make sure we understand where we are heading and what we're asking for.
Ann?
I think that's a good idea as well. And as it was mentioned this morning, we had our Economic Development Day. We're trying to coordinate our own initiative in the municipality of Kincardine. And our CAO is also now in charge of economic development at the office, but is trying to coordinate with the local groups. We're down that path, but I'd like to see how that's going to roll out with the county and what everybody's ideas are. I think that's a great idea.
Mike?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I do too. I think, but I think we need to, in the context of we've pretty well have an idea where we're going. At least I think we do with the business plan and and I think that's the type of thing that we need to communicate to the lower tiers and how they fit into it. Because I think if you don't have a path forward and something where you're going with it, it's going to spin into a whole new reevaluation and a whole bunch of new ideas that we're going to be. So I think we need to understand where we want to go. This is where the county's going. This is where we think we're going, and how do you fit into it? And we want your support.
Okay, anything else for Chris? Clear as mud, Chris?
It's all about the communication.
That's correct. Okay.
So then he's back up to 6 people, is that?
That's what I heard, so I'm not sure.
Well, can I clarify that from my perspective? No, I would not agree with that.
From what I'm hearing around the table today, I think maybe the path forward is we have to have a sit down first maybe with county councilors and talk about the Bruce County lens as we see it as committee members, then take it down to the lower tiers. Then that would maybe drive the amount of people that we need to implement this this program. So I think today it's probably a little bit early for just saying, here, Chris, you get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we have to have that meeting or meetings to come up with a path forward. So, and that should probably happen sooner than later, obviously because of budget reasons. So, but on the other hand of it, this whole process of operational review and strategic plan and everything we've done has moved everything to this direction. So it's probably the right thing to do. We're in uncharted territory that we've never been here before. I mean, for natural gas, for example, there was no go-to person at the County of Bruce through our whole natural gas process. So who is that person? Who is that contact for any business? So I think those are questions that have to be answered. So, fair enough? Paul, you look like you have something to add.
So the FTEs bit was, on today's farm, Chris is showing 4 FTEs, but to be clear, 2 of those FTEs are coming over from the Port Elgin Economic, and money comes with them.
Yep.
So really, Chris has 2 FTEs for economic development, that under Mitchell's plan, which is a good one, those 2 FTEs could be, to start June 1st, could be, he could lower his budget here. In other words, those 2 FTEs are just half year for 2016. Well, then we might have a better idea of what we're doing.
Through you, Mr. Warden, the FTEs, just for clarity, on the non-BEC BEC, one of those is a planning
Tech.
individual for application tech, and the other is for economic development. And the two BEC positions are funded by the province, but we will go through the recruitment process. I just also want to be clear that it's not an assumption that the individuals who currently are in those roles are just going to become county employees. We have to follow our procedure of having a recruitment process. If you wished for us to time it, we could do that. Right now, they are timed for 12 months, so that next year, they're already in the budget. We're not talking about it, but depending on timing, the reality is you probably would be up to budget, up against budget, I should say, in terms of favorability.
What's council's thoughts, committee's thoughts?
The planning and the economic development portion, FTE, and I'm on page 188, and I'm just looking at the so the new project coordinator sector position.
Sorry, my little box here has died, but that is the position that Chris's team are recommending under economic development to focus on sector development.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Thank you.
All right, well, we're very pleased today that Sherry Dillon from the Highways Department is joining us, and Brian has had another commitment. So you can see the Highways contributed extensively to our savings of $584,000, and we would just turn it to Sherry to describe what those changes were. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We've had 3 changes to reduce our initial budget submission. We've removed $100,000 from our roadways paved capital budget. As Benny Ann mentioned earlier, we've also made a small reduction. It's modest for the utilities increase that we had originally budgeted. And our final reduction was the removal of $110,000 for our non-union employee, which brings us to a rough an estimate of about approximately 3% increase.
Okay, is anybody going to be mean to Sherry today? Was there method in Brian's madness to send you down, Sherry?
I'm really not sure. He did catch me at the very last minute,
Yes.
so.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Just wondering if Sherry could comment, if we needed to cut your budget by another $100,000, where would you take it?
I'm not sure I'd be wise to comment.
And I think just to add for that, because we did meet again as department heads Tuesday, so department heads had come up with some initial reductions, and then as of Tuesday, where we were still not particularly close to our target, we had made some additional changes. So prior to those changes that Sherry spoke to today, the highways budget had also a further $375,000 out of capital as well, correct? Which brings the total to the 584. Yes. You thought your math was different? Yeah, so
Out of
those
the
were
roads
just-
capital, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Sherry? Okay. Next.
Social services and housing.
So the reduction that we have before you from the October 8th presentation to today is $278,776. What that is comprised of is a $100,000 reduction in a transfer to reserve for the housing facilities capital. So instead of reaching the goal of $2 million that we set out to do about 5 years ago, we would be putting $1.9 million into reserve. We've pulled in further use of reserves that we have available for children's services for $45,000. We have removed the Ontario Work Supervisor staff position that was cost shared with the province, so that was about $42,000. We have reduced the fee subsidy to that we can for children's services that wouldn't result in provincial loss of subsidy. And so that's about 35,000. What we could see happen is that we may reach a wait list for the childcare fee subsidy, but that does bring down that reduction to a level that we're still utilizing all available provincial subsidy. We have reduced by 25,000 the NCBS grant dollars, where we were looking for that additional support for the Community Participation Fund, which is the recreation dollar. But what we've done is we will cut in the community granting and redirect that $25,000 from the community granting to the rec fund. So there would be no effect on the children receiving recreation services. That would continue to maintain at previous levels, but there will be an impact in the community granting. We have reduced our electricity increase to the 14%, which results in a further about $21,000 in savings. And then we've also had some small reductions in fuel, oil, and training and travel for about another $12,000. And so that's how we were able to establish the savings of $278,000. We have reduced the capital projects by $200,000, and the reason that we've done that is so that we are not creating a further negative net impact on our reserve balance for the housing portfolio at the end of the year. So we have reduced that capital spending by removing 2 projects. With our business plan, it does change our departmental goal number 5 slightly, that we will modify the scope of what we're able to do in the Ontario Works goal, because we won't have that supervisory position to assist with that, but we will still be able to work towards the goal in itself. Any questions?
Thank you, Christine. Questions? And one of the reasons you're getting rid of those 2 projects is because we just physically can't get the work done, or?
Removal of those goals will ensure that we remain around the $1 million in the reserve at the year end, so that we have those in case something unforeseen would happen. And additionally, by removing those jobs, it's an economy of scale gain, because they're 2 jobs that are the same. So by doing them at the same time in the next year, there's savings and efficiencies in doing that same type of work. And additionally, by removing those projects, we free up some staff resources, the same staff that will be working on the goal in the business plan for the regeneration. And so that will allow them to focus some time and energy on that.
But again, with these proposals, we're not meeting that $2 million target. I guess that is a question for committee. Are we comfortable taking that $100,000 out again, or we as a committee, should we be getting the $2 million in there?
So Christine, we're at 175 going in, 1,750,000?
This year, with this budget before you, we're reaching 1.9 million.
Okay.
Through you, Warden, I would also add that, as you're aware, each year with the uploading of social assistance, we do gain some additional return in dollars there. So again, there will be some additional dollars that come available through the social assistance budget again next year. There's 2 more years left in the upload. But this is bringing us to a 1.9 transfer to reserves for housing facilities.
So we're okay with that, committee? Okay. Any other questions for Christine? Okay, moving on.
Gateway Haven is a reduction of $17,000.
Yes, and that $17,850 has been achieved through further reducing the reserves in our capital budget by $15,000. We were able to cut our phone costs by $1,000 and our utilities 1% of $18,500. So there's the difference between this submission today and the October 8th submission. And we now stand at a request of 6.81% request county contribution.
Emergency Services.
Okay, first of all, we've utilized $100,000 of the $200,000 additional funding from the ministry last year that was in reserves for capital purposes. We have also utilized $5,000 from the Red Cross Reserve to fund the Red Cross agreement. And as far as the others go, we have reduced the transfer to reserves, or we've eliminated the transfer to reserves for emergency management laptops of $7,875. And we've also eliminated the transfer to reserves for public access defibrillators at, which amounts to $9,000. And so from reserves, basically we've taken $105,000 from reserves. Other savings, I've removed the purchase of a replacement of the emergency response vehicle at $65,000. It's gone. I've also removed $11,416 that we were planning on for station generators. I have reduced the vehicle fuel expenditure, $19,877. I've reduced vehicle maintenance, $1,778. I've eliminated the training mannequin at $2,750. And we've reduced our utilities by 1%, which amounted to $436 for our purposes. So our total savings amount to approximately $220,632, or reduced to $220,632. We are now down to an increase of 2.95% from October 8th.
Good, thank you, Doug. Questions for Doug? Ann?
I just didn't hear you there when you were removing things. Did you say you removed generators?
Yes, we had planned on installing generators in stations, and we've decided to hold that off for another year.
And so you're comfortable that that gives you whatever backup you need, and they're...
We have portables now for backup, and we feel that we can hold that off for another year.
Okay.
Anything else? Oh, sorry, Paul.
Doug, when you're removing that emergency vehicle, which is going to take one of our uplanders off the road, and removing $60,000, but is that $60,000 of county dollars or $30,000? We losing provincial dollars there because we're not going to buy it, or how does that work again?
Yeah, the vehicle would be $65,000 actual cost, 50% of our budget.
So are we removing $30,000? Is all we're removing here then, Betty Ann?
The ministry's calculation for the provincial subsidy basis, typically the capital is it's based on amortization and not on actual capital expenditures. So it's in all likelihood that it would be a $60,000 county expense to purchase the ERV. We won't. This budget here is based on our level of revenue provincial subsidy that was approved, that we received in April of 2015. In the last couple of years, it has been realigned, and that's what Doug refers to, the $200,000 that was increased this year that was put into reserves for capital purposes. So unfortunately, the calculation for paramedic services with the province, the 50-50, isn't as clear as 50-50, because I would turn to Doug. Have we been 50-50 for, when's the last time we were 50-50?
I can't say for sure, to tell you the honest truth. We've always been on the losing end of the 50-50 arrangement, And it hasn't been as bad in recent years as it was in previous years.
But the bottom line is they don't base it on our actual
No.
capital expenditures. It's based on the amortization of our current vehicles, so.
One more question, Mr. Warden, if I could. So your capital still has reduced that vehicle, but you still have 2 new ambulances to replace vehicles we have on the road with over 400,000 K on them
Yes, we do. We've got 2
Okay, good.
ambulances at $310,000 is the total cost.
each.
No, total cost, 155 each.
Oh, is that all they are?
Okay, anything else for Doug? Okay.
Library.
Thank you. So the October 8th submission increase was $57,596, or 1.88%. I've been able to reduce that to $15,942, or 0.52%. That's a total decrease of $41,654. This is a reduction to salaries, wages, and benefits request for additional hours under service initiatives, and that's a reduction of $40,274. The salaries budget is now $71,687,959. There's also a reduction to staff-related costs under service initiatives of $1,000. That was a request to increase staff training by $1,000. And a further small reduction in our facilities costs under maintained services of $380, and that's for the projected utilities increase.
Thank you, Melissa. Any comments, questions? Thank you.
The final remaining was museum, and Kathy just asked me if I could just relay to you what the changes were. You can see the museum was a decrease of $68,000, and she was able to accomplish that with a transfer to reserves being reduced by $30,000, plans that she had for building up certain reserves. Again, a modest $975, trying to make them thousands. And as she had indicated in her capital, that the plans was to replace the 1878 school building roof, and it likely is in need of repair, but that was a budget of $38,000, and she was prepared to defer that, or we could seek alternative financing to complete that if it's found necessary in 2016. So that was a total reduction of $68,975.
Any questions concerning museum? Okay. You weren't going to answer them anyways. So I guess we should talk about Bruce Lee Haven, so I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Warden, right now, Bruce Lee is very much draft form, and as Director Cobain articulated, the 4.28% we understand is not where you directed us to. With Bruce Lee right now, there are 2 primary drivers on the increase of $264,700. One is there was a market reduction in the case mix index, or the CMI, a substantial impact, a little over $160,000, and the balance is largely driven by changes in the labor costs. We will be spending more time going through this, so we appreciate that this isn't endorsement.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, questions or comments? I guess my comment would be if we are acceptable of the Gateway Haven increase, would that be the kind of direction we would give staff to come back with similar numbers? I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion.
I would just let them review it and come in where they can, as low as they can.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have one more question. Are we finished with Bruce Lee, or?
No, I think we're still...
Okay, okay.
In further to the Gateway and the Bruce Lee, I would just offer, as Kelly referred to, the case mix index, and that really does drive the revenue, the provincial revenue, and if the care that we have is a higher level for Bruce Lee or a higher level in Gateway, that will make a significant difference. But then again, the model of care that we have established for the staffing would then be realigned for that. So we would welcome the opportunity to do further review on that.
Is that okay with committee? Okay. Okay, I think that is all the presentations, I do believe. Milt, you had a question or a comment?
Thank you. The high-speed internet, I was trying to, have we set aside money for that?
SWIFT.
The $172,000 annual fee is included within the corporate services budget and currently funded from the County Forest Reserve.
Okay. And we're getting an update on that soon.
Through you, Mr. Warden, the Western Wardens Group are dealing with it on the 30th, next Friday, and the staff plan is to have a report before you at the November meeting.
Okay, any other comments or questions? So I'm always willing to listen to motions. Are you willing to put it on the table? So for staff direction then, what are we giving as staff direction? Comments, Ann?
How long do you need for the Bruce Lee Haven report? Another month or a couple of weeks? Or?
Through you, Mr. Warden, there's a series of staff meetings set up for next week. So probably the second meeting day in November, we could have some information rolled up.
I was just thinking we kind of need that first to complete.
So is everybody comfortable with everybody else's positions, or?
I'd like to see 3%. That's it depends how far we're going with economic development, I guess, so.
Chris, I think you...
Yes, I was curious with regard to further consultation regarding the path forward for economic development. So we'd be happy to at a staff level, initiate that with local councils and get that moving along. But would it be appropriate to set a date in advance of the final budget being set for perhaps a half-day facilitated discussion with council in terms of to check in and make sure we're on the right track?
Through you, Mr. Warden, in keeping with Chris's comments, the only thing I'd suggest is it not be a committee day, that it be a meeting day just solely for that, so that it has a single focus.
I agree with that suggestion. Mike?
Just to clarify, when you say local councils, like, what do you envision there? You don't envision all 8 full councils going to a...
No. I think just from a preliminary sense, I think we would attend council meetings and provide the presentation there. I just haven't thought of another format yet to get it done quicker, but that seems the obvious as our staff to go to your councils and discuss it at that level, and then deal with county council through the facilitated session. And there's nothing, that's not very creative, nothing to say we couldn't do something different, but from a preliminary perspective, that's what I would do, how I would handle it.
Because it's going to be a challenge for you to do that with 8 councils, and whatever way you come up with, it's not going to be real easy in timing, as I think we're looking for an approval date here, not too different in the future for this budget, and I think you will not get consultation with. I think it's going to be almost impossible to get to all councils. It's putting a lot of pressure on you to do that.
Is there some potential that we would open up the county, that we pick a date that the 8 people on this council would agree to, and then invite other local councillors to attend, or councillors and staff, perhaps?
Sure, go ahead. Be honest with you, I'm not so much concerned that we get the input from all local councils before we approve this budget. I think our focus should be on our budget here first. I don't want to put that on you and then we've got at least something to say, this is where we're going, because you're going to get a meeting where we don't know where we're going, because we really haven't approved the budget. Right. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get you out of some difficult situations.
Ann?
The only thing I can think of, but I agree with Mike, it's hard to, with the time constraints. But for example, we have our staff person, or 1 or 2, with economic development, and maybe our economic development policy chair, counselor. So you would eliminate having the discussion with the full council at this time, or even for the first time. So you could have because if you go to 8 different council meetings now, I think you'd just be going around in circles. It would be very difficult. Maybe if you could have a smaller format first. That's just a suggestion. But I agree with Mike. I don't think it can be achieved before this budget.
Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Warden, perhaps a next step is that staff take it away, reflect on the dialogue, and allow the budget process to unfold, and we come back to you with a suggested game plan, and perhaps it needs to be 2 separate sessions, one with just county council, and then a second with county council and your key staff, whether it be just your CAO's administrators or your CAO administrator and whoever is your point person for ECDEV as an option.
That seems like a logical path forward. Okay. Anything further? Mike?
I know if you're looking for some general direction, maybe I wouldn't mind giving it now. A couple comments. First of all, I think I really like, although I've struggled with a little bit of understanding and how to manipulate through this document, and part of it is, I think, here in my is my abilities, but I really do like it, because I think on a yearly basis we're going to have some very good comparisons going forward in 2 and 3 years from now in this format. We're going to really see where the pressure points are for budgets. As I struggle all the time when we continue to increase numbers of employees. But in the same breath, I know we're asking staff to do lots more. And I think if we really want to reach those goals that we're going to set for ourselves here in this economic development, that I would support going forward with those people. Having said that, I'm closer to the number that Milt had, would definitely be under 4, and closer to 3 that I'd be comfortable with.
Other suggestions? Ann?
I don't want to settle on a percentage until I kind of, like Dave's suggestion, make sure that we've given the direction for this new program in economic development. So I just like to get a better handle on that first before settling on a percentage myself, whether it's 3 or 4.
Other comments? Why don't we let staff go back? I think they've heard all of our concerns, and obviously there's still room for savings, I do believe, and I think we can find some kind of common ground. So I think we will put it back to staff to come back to us with some more proposals. How does that sound? Okay. Are we going to deal with the reserves? Yes. Item C?
The information item is included, reserves and reserve funds for December 31st. Our goal is to provide you with an analysis as to the projections for 2015 based on budget and actual, and also to provide a document that will give you the terms and conditions of each of those reserves and reserve funds. So our goal is to have that provided to you before year end or very early in for January. But going forward, this is the current analysis. And Darlene, I know that we've been tasking you to update this so many times that this document didn't make its way into the final document, but we'll make sure it's posted. I know it went out in the original that you didn't make its way into this version, but we'll get updated. But it's for information purposes. Showing as action, but it was information.
Okay. And next meeting is actually November the 12th. Need a motion to adjourn. Milt and Janice, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you.